at the World Championship run by EFRAG a few weeks ago, that national tournament where teams like Russia, Germany, Sweden send along national teams made up of players from different sides. You had Hooch playing for Russia, and this is a player who hasn't done a whole lot in CSGO, but has a long history in 1.6. And so I want to explain to you who Hooch the player is. Now, first and foremost, he's not an all-time great player. He's not a player who accomplished some great feat and won some huge LAN or ever did anything phenomenal on an international stage. He had a few okay placings, but in general, like a lot of the Russian players who were around the top tier, unfortunately, big international performances were few and far between in terms of top placings, mainly because they played an extremely individualistic, just aim-heavy style that was just based on playing those individual maps, Inferno, Dust 2, Tuscan, just running around by yourself, sometimes baiting people, trying to go with your headshots over team play, and even more so, a lot of force buying, a lot of buying deagles on saves. I mean, to me, it's not a save. You buy deagle. Back in 1.6, this is. But he's a player where he played a long time. He's played professional level. I mean, I guess it's hard to say professional as CSGO, but he's played around top competitions for like 10 years at this point in time. So he is a guy who, I mean, he obviously loves CS, he loves to compete, he's been to that cyber arena a million times. He's also someone where people might not realize this, but he's actually played at, I think, by my count, he's played at 6 World Cyber Games. I think that's correct. He played at 6 different World Cyber Games. He played in 2005, which was Source, 2006, 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011. Now, some of those years at the end is because 2 teams could represent Russia, so he was able to go with the second team at times. But he got his start in terms of the world stage, right? He was already playing within Russia and Ukraine and CIS region. They already had this cool little LAN circuit where they were having tons of tournaments, these Asus Cups particularly, but there were other tournaments at the time. And he was playing Asus Cups already with VP or former Virtus.pro members. Virtus.pro was an all-Russian, it was the top team within the region around that time. He was already playing before he got to join Virtus.pro, but when he got to join Virtus.pro, he actually came in as like the flashy new blood who was entering this team that had all these great players but never quite got in the mix correctly except for Acon 5. And he actually came in, and initially he did a frag movie type clip from a demo, which was in a lot of frag movies at the time. I think it was against the UK, or maybe it was Dignitas. I think it was Virtus.pro vs Dignitas. That could have been it. On Train, where he just killed everyone with the AWP. And a lot of the Russians were famous for the AWP. And he was like a very quick firing AWP style player. So that was around 2005. And with that Virtus.pro lineup, he was able to make it to the final of Clan Base 11 offline finals and lose to Mouse Sports there, who were one of the best teams of the year. Probably the second best team of the year overall, the German Mouse Sports team. Then 2006, he's staying with Virtus.pro, but they're not accomplishing much. They're having difficulties even sometimes within their own region. 2007, he plays initially with Rush 3D, where he hooks up with Romshka, first of all, who would later on go to become one of the better latter-day Russian players in the coming years. And he's someone who always seemed to be friends with Hooch. Then he played in Big Rip, who at a time was kind of like the second best Russian team. And there he was playing with a bunch of young guys who hadn't really made it yet. And he'd play with some of them later in his career, like Dingo, Zenitron. Some of them were thought to be cheaters actually online, because they were very good online in like IEM/Eurocup type tournaments, but all offline. Yeah, some of that remained to be seen how decent they were. Made it to 3rd place in Clan Base 15 finals at the LAN, but that was where it was quite a weak field. Like, yeah, NOA won the LAN, but even they weren't considered quite world-class yet, as in they were a top level team, but they hadn't won a huge tournament. The second best team was CMAX, which was the second best Finnish team, so it wasn't that sick a LAN. 2008, he joined up with Amazing Gaming, and what's interesting here is that's because Amazing Gaming was the best Ukrainian team, and at the time, Ukraine had just gotten themselves on the map by getting a bronze medal at the 2007 WCG Grand Finals. And so the team he joined up with were members from that lineup, so he was playing with... The 2 players you'll recognize now is Blade, who's obviously in-game leader of Flipside now, was the coach of Hellraisers at the DreamHack Winter 2014 Major, and more importantly Starix, who one of the all-time great players from that region, was one of the best players of 2010, playing with Navi, 3rd best player on that team behind Edward and Marklov, and they obviously won everything in 2012, pretty much all the majors, set the prize money record. So he played with this team for a while, which is interesting that a Russian player would go over to Ukrainian team as opposed to the other way around. And was working out initially. They won an Aces Spring back when these Aces tournaments were very competitive. At Game Goon, an international tournament, but we're not quite all the best teams there. A lot of the Swedish top Nordic teams didn't attend. Placed third place there behind MIBR and Mouse. Then with a mixed team, he qualified for WCG that year. But none of the WCGs did he ever go particularly far. Usually used to get stopped in like the round of 16, round of 8. So nothing really to write home about there, but got to represent his country a lot. At the end of the year, there was this Recruit tournament where he managed to finish third place with Amazing Gaming behind MTW, behind Virtus.pro. So that was a pretty decent sort of international tournament because it had some foreign teams coming into Russia to play in it. And at the end of the year, he joins up with Virtus.pro again. He returns. And this is our lineup that has Lex, who's before Dosia, was the greatest Russian player ever in the history of that country's, and was kind of the genius of their country. Extremely versatile player, very good. Then there was Romshka, who he's hooked up there again, Zenitron and Dingo, who I mentioned he'd played with previously in Big Rip and Rush 3D, respectively. 2009, he ends up rejoining Virtus.pro at some point in time. Now he's playing with these similar sorts of people. Maybe that was actually, I've got it confused a bit there. But he managed to place fourth at Game Goon this time. This is the one where the Poles actually finished second, I think. And the team disbands again at the end of the year, though, November, because it didn't have the good results overall. They've been at WCG, though, and towards the end of the year, he gets to join this super team, where what happens is, everyone remembers the story that this guy, Arbalest, this millionaire guy, came into CSGO at CS 1.6, he was running his own LANs, and then he started funding the team that became Na'Vi. He said to Starix, make a team, and that's how Na'Vi was able to become this super team and take over the world. What people don't know is, or rather they don't remember, is that he also funded a second team, and this team was called United, and the premise, the conceit of the team was, it had to be represented by players from multiple different teams within the CIS region. So as a result, it had Adrian and Nikol, who were Kazakhstani players from K23, and it had Romshka and Finn and Hooch from Russia, and then later on it would have some Ukrainian players. I think Kraftik or Kucha came into the lineup for a little while. Now, early on, they had some success. They actually won Arbalest February, which was a very competitive CIS tournament where they placed ahead of Na'Vi. Na'Vi placed fourth place at this one and bombed that one amazingly. They beat out Ping, which was like Kucha, Kraftik, LMBT. They beat out Forza, who was the second best Russian team, which was like Dosia, Edik, Fox, those guys. Romshka, I think. Oh no, Romshka was playing in United, actually, so I don't know what I'm talking about there. The thing is, though, they went to the Gathering, which was like a team tournament. They didn't have that many great teams and actually lost out to a top Swedish mix of like really skilled players there. They were last place at Arbalest Best of 4, which was an exhibition tournament of Na'Vi, Fnatic, SK, so top elite level teams, and then United, and they couldn't really compete. They had some okay results, but overall were unable to win an overall series. Then you had the United team lost its sponsorship because they hadn't overall been able to show any top international performances. And at the end of the year, Arbalest was going to kind of drop the team anyway. So then he goes over and he's playing with Meteor Makers Russia. And this team had Romshkin again, but now they had like Zek, who later on would go on to play with Moscow 5. And they had, who else was it? Zoma. And then, unfortunately, for World Cyber Games, where he qualified again, they had to take Mega, who was actually the manager, just because they had issues in terms of getting a visa. I think it was Edik that had to drop out there. He went to the WCG, but again, nothing to write home about. 2011, he's playing early on. I think he was a stand-in, actually, at IEM with the IEM European Championship with Forza, who at the time was Heli, former all-time great, very skilled, but not great accomplishments Virtus.pro player. LMBT was a Ukrainian guy who'd been in Ping and been the in-game leader. Kucha, Ukrainian guy, had been in DTS. Ping, of Overdrive, though, who's like known as this guy who's not a very skilled player, known more in CSGO, and he used to sort of just go to these teams, usually I think when he needed to help fund them, because he was known as like a player who had a lot of money somehow. I'm not sure, had a very good job or something. Then he plays in USSR, which later becomes Virtus.pro again. He gets to join the organization, which was more like a farm team of skilled young players, though. He got all these young guys in, so you had like Mice, Hacker, spelt with a 4, Evil, Kibaken. I mean, obviously Kibaken we'd later on see in CSGO. He joined up with Na'Vi after Edward and Marklov left. Then in 2012, he's a stand-in again, because he has a long history of being a stand-in. He's a stand-in for Virtus.pro. Let me think. No, it was a stand-in for DTS, which at the time was the second best team from Ukraine. And multiple times had beaten Na'Vi. He stands in for them at IEM 6 Kiev. They didn't manage a particularly great performance overall. Then with Virtus.pro again. Now he's playing there with Evil, Kucha, Zawok. These are Evil's Russian, the middle two are Ukrainian. He's with Lex again, a guy he played with many times in his career. Now, with this Virtus.pro lineup, they managed to have a shocking run at DreamHack Summer where they make the semi-finals, despite the fact they were in a group of death. They were in a group that had SK Gaming, which was all these beast players that had made tons and tons of top placings, Get Right Forest. They had Trace standing in as well. I think this was the time when they had Trace, or was this when they got Delpine back again? I think this was when they had Trace still. I'm not sure if that was the event they'd lost him from. That might be, no, I think Trace might have left at that point in time, actually. But this was a beast lineup. And then it was the WinFact SE, which was the Lemon Dogs lineup, which had finished top 4 at, I think they finished 3rd even, actually, maybe at IEM. So that was a top lineup with skilled players in it, Crystal, etc. Then they had ESC, who were the Poles, who'd won the last 2 majors. They won IEM World Championship and they won WCG the end of the year before. So of the teams in this group, they were supposed to be the fodder for all these top teams. And actually, they managed to get out of the group. And they managed to narrowly beat SK on train. SK, at their core at least, had been one of the best trained teams in the world. They managed to beat ESC, who were the Poles, on Inferno, a decent map for them, and brutalised them. Won like 12 terrorist rounds on a map that, if you're a good team, you could get a lot of CT rounds on that map. It was one of the most balanced maps. That was shocking. And then they tied WinFact on Tuscan, which was one of the best maps for that team historically, that core. So they really showed an incredible performance, but they had to play Na'Vi in the best of 3 in the semi-finals. They couldn't do that. They lost both maps. But they had a sick run overall. That was pretty much CSGO in terms of Hooch. He was early on in this Virtus.pro lineup as they were going into CSGO, but then the team changed before he was part of anything good there. He was playing in that team towards the end of 2012, and at the time the main player who would go on to become a successful player was Seized, who obviously is now a Na'Vi player. At one point was a star Na'Vi, now more of a supportive player. He played in like the AMD Sapphire Invitational, which was one of those tournaments which had a Very Games versus NIP final at the end of the year. Then he played in Nostalgie, which was a mix, always led by Overdrive, because he supposedly funded it in some way. And a couple of tournaments, Mad Cats Vienna, that was the one that had Angel, Dosia, Edek, and then Overdrive. And then it's Copenhagen Games right after the next month. But that one had Evil, Flamey, Edek, and then Overdrive. So you can see he's playing with a bunch of this talent. And obviously at that time, Flamey wasn't a famous player. That was before, back when people still thought he cheated in theory, or at least McAlady would later claim he did when they tried to qualify for, I think it was Cologne. And then in 2015, he was a stand-in for Peter, P-I-T-E-R, when they went to ESL Katowice qualifier, where famously they lost that overtime game to Kenny S on, I think it was Cash. Was it Cash? Or was it Dust 2? Where it was like a 25-23 type game, and Kenny S had like 54 frags or something ludicrous. That was the tournament where Waylander stood in and was pretty good, and Hooch was just a stand-in for them. Then he was a stand-in for Hellraisers this year at Star Series 13 finals. That's the one where Na'Vi beat Envious in the final, but they didn't do particularly well in the group stage. I mean, he was a stand-in. And then most recently, he went for the Russian team to the World Championships, and they made it to the semis there, and they were able to perform pretty decently overall against, let me think, the French team. But the French team was able to win that and eventually the whole tournament. So that's who Hooch is. Has a long history. He's even been playing CSGO a lot, considering he's never been in a really top team and done anything big. But a guy who loves CS, has played in a lot of top teams, has played with a lot of the talent, crucially. I don't know if anyone's played with more of the talent in the history of Russian/CIS region than him. He's the guy who knows a lot of talent. He's the guy who first explained to me how good Dosia was, beyond just this skilled player. Like that he was really like a genius level player, just in terms of talent I'm talking, not brains, obviously, because I don't sound like Dosia. So anyway, thanks to Alpha Draft for sponsoring this podcast. They have a lot of tournaments up there, ESL, ESEA Pro League. No doubt they'll have DreamHack Cluj-Napoca if you want to play there. All different levels of tournament, different entry fees, different prize versus, different types of tournament, half-wheel wins, triple ups. There's lots of different tournaments there. So if you want to play fantasy esports, why not check out alphadraft.com.
Hello, this is Neo, just an average CSGO player, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.